All right, we're still waiting for Drew, but I wanted to mention a question got asked during the break about the YouTube channel. And just so you see this, if you weren't aware of this, and yeah, Brady pointed out, I forgot all about this, that if you go out to the page on Inside Rankin, you go out to the main page here, you go down to the handout section, right down near the bottom of the handouts, the first part, which says, third part, I guess, which says miscellaneous. If you click there, it says Jeff Scott YouTube channel. So if you click there, it says click here, okay, and it brings you to the channel. All right. Now, sometimes it's confusing. It's like, wow, I don't know what's what here. You can click over here then, and it shows you the different, well, somewhere over here. It'll show you the different things that are, the different channels that I've got available, and that's Evan if you've never seen him. The other thing, too, is if you forget that, or, it's like that doesn't seem to work, you can just go out to youtube.com, and in the search box here, you can type in Jeff Scott, Rankin Technical College. And if you click search, there it is, and it brings you to the same place. All right, so they're all in there. You have to take my word for it, but they're in there. All right, so I want to go on, start in Chapter 3, so we're up to page 147. This is an interesting chapter for a lot of reasons, but one reason, just so you know, I have never seen a book in my life in any programming language that covers both arrays and control flow in the same chapter. I've never seen that before. Arrays typically are a topic that is so, for lack of better words, complex to most people that they typically get their own chapter. And normally, what most authors do is they go over ifs and switches and loops before they do arrays. But this author's not doing that. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just happens to be the way that they decided to write their book. All right? All right. So I'm going to show you this, and this is the way I explain or start to explain arrays to people. It may or may not make a lot of sense. And please, I say this all the time, but please, if something doesn't make sense, ask and keep asking. All right? So this isn't where I live, but I am in an apartment right now. So let's assume that an apartment was at 123 Main Street. All right? And where I live, it actually has 8 units in it. It's an 8-unit thing and a bunch of other things. All right? But let's assume that, we've got in there apartment 1 all the way through apartment 8. Okay, so I can change all these 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now that should make sense to everybody. Even if you've never lived in an apartment, chances are you know someone who has. You might be related to them, or it might be a friend, or whatever. Okay, the first thing to understand, if you look up on the screen here, if you're working with computers never start counting with 1. They always start counting with 0. So if we had an 8-unit apartment, X, in computer land, so to speak, that's how we do it. Does that make sense to everyone? So the first apartment would be apartment 0. That's just how it's done. All right? So I'm going to leave that up there for a second, and I'm going to just kind of, let's suppose, it's not bad in here with 9 of you. It really and truly isn't. But let's suppose that there's 90 of you instead of 9. Okay? If that was the case, you could probably imagine how tough it would be to grade a homework. Okay? And if there were 90 of you, I could literally have, student 1, student 2. In fact, we could even be like a computer and start with student 0, student 1, all the way up to, so I'm just going to put a ... here, meaning we go all the way up to student 89. We could do that, and that wouldn't be a problem. Except what if I forgot one of the students? Let's say I forgot student 73. Or let's say that I used student 64 twice. So it's real easy to screw it up when you're doing this. So what an array is, and again, I'm giving you my definition here. This isn't what you're going to find in the book. But typically, all right? So this is my definition of an array. a set of contiguous memory locations. We'll talk about what all this means in a minute, which may or may not hold the same type of value. Now, one of the questions that we're going to go over at the end of this, when we do the test review, is what is an array? This isn't the same definition as what's put in the book. All right? Now, what may confuse you, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, is this statement right here. Remember how I told you when we got into JavaScript that JavaScript is a little quirky? It's a little different? With JavaScript, you can create an array and it can hold anything. So I could have a number, followed by a date, followed by a name, followed by a Boolean, etc. Does that make sense to you? I can do that. That's going to be the only class that you take in this program where you can do that. When you use strongly typed languages like C+ or C# and Java, you can only put the same type of variable in there. So if I create an array that holds integers, all I can have in there is integers. So the may not JavaScript is one of the few. PHP is another one where you can have different types. Okay? All right. So let's suppose, okay, that I've got this set of people, and I'm going to try to keep it simple. Let's just suppose, in fact, I don't want to remove that. So let's say that apartment 0 is equal to Scott. Apartment 1 is equal to Williams. We'll make all of you stars here, all right? All right, apartment 3 will be Wilson. Apartment 2 will be Wilson. Apartment 3 will be Harris. Some of you would probably screw up your names if I try to write them, but I'll try anyway. So you're all going to be stars now forever because your name is going to be in here, and it'll be out on YouTube, so you'll be stars. All right. What is it? El Hassan? Is that? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Right. And Ivy, is it Zetter or Zettler? I don't remember. Zettler. Okay. Sorry about that. I mean, it's funny. I look at the stuff, but have you ever had that happen where somebody says to you, "What's your phone number?" and you kind of space because you never call yourself? I've done that before. You know, it's like, but that's also a sign of me getting old. So, who am I missing? Let's see. We got a Williams. I spell that right? Okay. Oh, I'm so proud of myself. And Evan, is that correct? Yep. Okay. Did I miss anybody? Don't want any of you. Oh, Valerie. Yep. What is it? Is that right? Okay. All right. So now you're all stars. So I can do this. And I could have 10 different variables because I put myself in there. All right? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. Okay? Let's face it. If all of us lived literally at 123 Main Street, and I'm not going to put the rest in, but Wentzville, Missouri, et cetera, chances are pretty good if you sent Evan a letter and you didn't put apartment 8, he'd still get it. All right, typically that's what happens. About half the mail that I get is sent to me to apartment 20, and about half of it doesn't even have the apartment number on it, but I get it. Okay? All right, but the point is, this is kind of a pain in the butt to do this. It literally is. Plus, you won't realize this until we start getting into loops in just a couple minutes. But this is a nightmare to try to work with this in loops. All right, so I can take this, what you see right here, and I can change it to this. I can say var, I'm going to call it apartments. We really should start our names with lowercase. So I'm just going to call it apartment. And I'm going to say equals, and this is going to take a minute, but because I didn't do a very good job of it, but I could do it like this. and it's going to fly off the screen. So if I want, I can only put, if I want to, I can put 2 of them per line. That's not a problem at all. It is a big problem if I forget one of those commas. It'll be a big problem. All right. Thank you. That'll be a problem too. Thank you. All right. You don't have to line them up. I'm just showing you how anal I am, but you don't have to. It works fine if they're not lined up. You can put them all on the same line. None of that stuff matters. I think you all realize I'm doing it the way I'm doing it just because I want you to be able to see everything. That's all. You put extra spaces in here if I want everything to line up pretty like. None of that stuff matters. And I'm hoping, I try to remember, I'm hoping that it's brackets that we use here. It's not curly braces. If it is, I'll have to change that. Do you understand how these would mean the same thing? All right. But what this is now, it's, imagine that somebody comes to deliver the mail for us, okay? And I'm not real artistic, but you imagine it looks like this. Okay, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so this is all referred to as apartments. Let me say apartment. So this is location 0, and what would be in there would be Scott, etc. Does that make sense? All right. So this is a string array right here. It's an array of strings. You could say, well, it's names. It is, but they're all strings. They could have been single quotes as well as double quotes, and it would have worked just fine. If I didn't want to do it like this, if I didn't want to do this, I could have come in here, and this would have been a pain in the butt to do, but we could have done this. I could have just come in and said, var apartment equal bracket bracket like this. All right. Now I'm gonna capital A to lowercase a. There. All right. Then I could have come in and I could have said this: apartment 0, apartment 1, 2. I'll just do them all like this because it'll be faster. Whoops. Yeah. So I could have done it like that. That's a lot more work, but it would have been fine to do it like that. So you might say that, okay, it is more work. Why would you ever do it like this? Sometimes you don't know ahead of time what the values are that you're going to put in there. All right? And let's go back to this. This is a key point here. What all computers try to do with arrays is they try to put them into contiguous memory. All right? Maybe you've done this. It's not as big a thing with computers today, but especially maybe 10, 15 years ago. It used to be you could, when you didn't have that much RAM in your computer and you didn't have that big a hard drive, you'd start filling up the hard drive and you notice it would get really slow. All right? And then you'd have to go run what's called a defrag program on, Charles was here, he'd love it, I'm talking hardware. But you'd have to basically, run a defragmentation program on your computer. And what happens is you save a bunch of stuff, you save more stuff, you save more stuff, you remove some stuff, you save some more stuff, you remove some stuff, etc. And you've got pockets of information that are together, that are holding, and you might have a little bit of memory here, then information, then a little memory here, then information, etc. When you run a defragmentation program, it tries to take all the available memory and put it in the same spot, everything that's available. All right. So why am I telling you that though? I'll take your question in a second. So why am I telling you that? Because what happens is an array in any language other than JavaScript and other than PHP, you're guaranteed this is always going to be contiguous. You're not guaranteed it's going to be contiguous in JavaScript and in PHP. And the reason that you're not guaranteed it's going to be contiguous is you can, while the program's running, I can add names to this. So if we add a couple people to our apartment, we can just make it bigger. All right? And if we decide, you know what, we're going to break this into 2 units, all right, then I could grab these 5 and put them into 1 unit, etc. You understand what I'm saying? So I can change the size of the array as the program's running. All right. When you can change something when the program's running, because I'm just throwing a little terminology out to you, it's what's referred to as being late binded. That means you can decide it at runtime. All right. And JavaScript and PHP, those I believe are the only 2 languages that I know. I'm not saying the only 2 languages. I think the only 2 that I know that are both late binded. So you can do things at runtime. So all other languages are early binded. When they're early to binded, you have to decide at compile time. And you might say, what's the big deal? The big deal is when it's done at runtime, you can change it as the program's running. When it's done at compile time, you can't change it as the program's running. All right? So a lot of the latitude that you're going to see this semester with arrays for JavaScript, you won't be able to do the same stuff in C# next semester and in Java after that. Your question.
You were talking about the brackets there with the numbers in it next to apartment.
Yes.
You were saying you're putting that there just in case you don't know what name you're putting there?
No, what this means is create an array with no size.
No.
There's no size because there's nothing in there. Okay?
Just doing that.
Now, what a weird thing,
Similar if you were to do like an array or whatever and then just put like a bunch of blank double.
you could have done that too.
It's like, is it?
Yeah. No, there's not really any difference. No.
Yeah, okay.
But I want to show you this. This is another weird thing about this language. And again, this one and PHP are one of the only ones I know. Let's say I fat-fingered here. So we've got a new apartment. We got a new person that we're going to put in here. We're going to say that they're Jones. And you say, Jeff, you made a mistake. Yeah, I purposely made a mistake. Okay? I fat-fingered and put 100 instead of 10 in there. All right? What it does is it gives me 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, all the way to 100. It makes all those blank. All right? So you can do that. Not only can you add things while the program's running, like this, which is a pretty cool thing, but you can put them in anywhere you want. Okay? Which is pretty powerful. Yes.
Put them out of order?
Yes, you can put them in out of order if you want to. It doesn't really matter. Well, I mean, what you're going to see real soon is we're going to put them in using loops, and then you'll have to put them in order that way. You use loops. Because they'll go a lot faster that way. Yes.
I guess it's not really a big deal, but like checking it in the debugging menu or whatever, you know how in our assignments you put those brackets in next to it and it would go to that, whatever it was in the array, I guess. So like if I made a mistake on there, it would point it out and say like
It's going to try to. So for instance, if I left, as an example, this may not be what you're saying, but if I did that, it's typically that's exactly where it's going to point.
And it'll tell you what line to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm talking about
But
just like
sometimes when you
making
do things with arrays, it'll go through, since it's an interpreter and it says, well, I can do this, I can do this. Then it gets down to the bottom, and then you try to run one of the array functions on it, and it doesn't work. So what I'm telling you though is, it'll give you an error, but the error might not be exactly where the problem is. All right, it'll be somewhere between the beginning of the program and where the line is that they give you the error. It shouldn't be afterward. So go ahead.
I wasn't really talking about an error being in the array
Okay.
necessarily, but just putting it in wrong in the debugging window, and then it'll flag it as like that's not in your array.
What the debugger will try to do, I mean, think about it. It's software, which means it was written by a human, which means it's already fallible. It's not infallible. All right? So it'll do everything it can to try to figure out, if you screw up, what you did wrong.
Right.
But if, and I don't mean to say you do this, but if you make it your intention to, I'm going to really try to hose this debugger, you probably can do it. Where it comes up and it gives you an error message, or it doesn't give you any errors. Or the other thing too is if you have a logic error, maybe you saw that earlier when I ran that, I didn't get any errors, but there was still a problem because I had a logic error in my code. All right, the debugger won't find those. But again, when we get to chapter 4, we're going to do a lot more work with the debugger.
But just for the sake of like sending that debugging screen in, because that's what I was doing for the assignments, like just sending what I had there in, like on my, I put them in the files with our assignments.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, but just to make it look clean, because I accidentally put in, 100, checking it in the brackets instead of 10.
Right.
Right? Like you just did.
It's not going to flag. It's not going to flag that as an error.
Okay.
No, because it thinks good, bad, or indifferent. It thinks you know what you're doing.
Okay.
All right.
Gotcha.
All right. So that's already a big thing into arrays. When we get done with that, we're going to talk about loops, and I'm going to. It's very interesting because I'm going to show you how to count to 10, 3 different ways. All right, and that's why, because that's how I show people loops, because it's the easiest way to learn. We're just going to print out, we'll go from 1 to 10, and you'll see it 3 different ways of doing it. The while, the do while, and the for. We'll look at continue, also break. We'll look at ifs and else and switches. All right, and we'll nest one if statement in another. I can already tell, based on the way the time is going today, probably it's going to take most of the period to go over this. So what I think I'm going to do, all right, and I'm going to try to split the difference, Tiffany, with what you talked about before. What I'll do for next class is I will print you out hard copies of the test. All right, that way if you want to key the stuff in, you'll be able to do that. And if you don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. All right, I have to watch it. Charles hasn't said anything yet, but I've got a feeling, looking at it, that I'm using a lot more paper than anyone else in here is. All right. The other thing I'm going to do for Monday is I'm going to give you the array program, but again, I'm going to give you the hard copy. I think there's a lot of benefit to keying it in. It's not, and the problem is you pick up bad habits if all you do is I keep giving you code and you end up just okay, and you manipulate that code. You're not as strong a programmer that way. All right? Okay, so we'll also talk a little bit about nesting, and it's kind of neat. Maybe I've shown you this before, I don't remember, but I'll show you how to create a clock with about 10 lines of code. That'll go literally from midnight to midnight. Okay? So when we get into where we're talking about whiles and fors and do whiles and ifs and switches, etc., then we're talking about control flow. Everything we've been doing so far, other than that if is not a number, everything has been sequential. Do this, do this, do this, do this, etc. We're changing that in this chapter. All right? So that's what the author's talking about with control flow. So I'm not going to go through this. This is the author's. You might want to write that down right now, what's in blue, because that's one of the questions on the test. I don't remember. In fact, it might be in there twice. It might be in there in the matching and in one of the other questions. I don't remember. But the author calls it a set of data represented by a single variable name. And that is what it is. And I'll tell you what else I'll do. I forgot all about that. I mentioned that to you. When we take our next break, I'm going to send you electronic copies of all the test reviews. Okay, I said I'd do that, and I forgot all about it, so I'll do that during the break. All right. It says you can think of an array as a collection of variables within a single variable. It's not a bad way of looking at it. I've given this example before. You may or may not like it. It may or may not make any sense to you. I'm dating myself here, all right, because I'm about to tell you something that you may never have heard of. I'm just asking, how many of you have ever heard of Tinker Toys? Okay, well, that's most of you. When I was a little kid, that was a lot of the kind of stuff that we played with. And with Tinker Toys, there were a few different types, but the main types were you had a stick. Literally, you had a stick. And then you had a thing that was round. Oops. You had a thing that was round. That's going to look great. And it had a bunch of spokes on it. And you could take the stick and stick it into any one of those spokes. Okay, make sense? All right, so imagine it was the first day of class. You walk into class, and I actually had this happen to me when I was a student at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I walked into a psychology class first day, into a lecture hall. I'd never been in a room like that before. There were 500 people in it. And the teacher was purposely late because he was checking us all out and doing a bunch of other stuff that doesn't really matter. All right, but imagine that I was the professor and I walked in and I said, hey, I'm running a little late. So what's happening is right now, the teaching assistants are going to hand each one of you a Tinker Toy. Play with it for 15 minutes and I'll be back, and then we'll start that. You know, your first instinct is, you know, what a nut, or worse. All right, but you might sit there. Okay, let's face it. When you got the stick, if you bent it enough, you'd break it. All right, it wasn't hard to break those. You could roll it a little bit, whatever. You could do the same thing with these would be a little harder to break. All right, but let's say that Amin says, hey Valerie, let me have that stick. So he puts it together. All right, so you could eventually build yourself, let's say, a real crude looking car. Does that make sense? What we've been working with so far are these. These are primitive variables. That's what a real primitive variable is. And they can only hold a single value. That's what makes them a primitive variable. All right. What we're getting into now, all right, this is also, it's got a bunch of different names. It depends on the book you read. Sometimes they're called elementary data items. Again, it depends on the book you read. What we're getting into now are what are called data structures. And the difference is they don't hold a single value. They're a collection of values. So we're taking those single Tinker Toys and we're putting them together and creating something out of them. The key thing to realize is when you're working with data structures, they're not a collection of values, they're a collection of primitive values. So you're just combining a bunch of primitive stuff together. And that's what I showed you when we looked at that thing with the apartments. Oops, that wasn't good. Yeah. Well, that was great. Hopefully that's going to reset itself. All right. Yeah, that's real nice, isn't it? That's lovely. I may have to shut that off and turn it back on again. This isn't good. I did put in a work order. They got back to me saying that they got the work order. That's where we're standing right now. All right. I guess so. I've already told my wife, it's funny you bring that up, whoever said that that's what I actually want on my tombstone. No, his life was a work in progress. I've already told that to my wife. She thinks I'm sick anyway, so. All right. Okay, so it says there are a couple of different ways that you can declare arrays. Does that look familiar? That's what we just did, right? All right, so that's creating an array. So that's declaring and initializing the array. You don't put the ... in there. They're just trying to show you could make it as big as you wanted it to be. All right? And there's an example. There's another array of strings. So those are news sections that you might find in a magazine or a newspaper or whatever. World, local, opinion, and sports. Typically you put spaces in there, but you don't have to. All right? If we only use, does this make sense to everybody? Let's say that we screwed this up. And instead of having world, comma, local, etc., we kept the commas, but if we only had one set of parentheses or of double quotes, one here and one here, that's only one value. Does that make sense? If we had, instead of having it like this, if we'd have said this, double quote world, comma, local, comma, opinion, comma, sports, double quote, double quote. That's only one value because there's only one set. There's only one set of double quotes.
Around each word to make it a value.
It's the double quotes around each word, if that's what you're saying. That's what makes each one of them their own an element. Now, when you're doing numerics, you don't use the double quotes, but you need the commas. So if I'd have said, instead of this, if I'd have said var, I don't know, let's say for wins. So we're going to have the number of wins the team had in the season. 100, comma, 56, comma, 73, comma, 88, comma, 91. In that case, we don't put them in double quotes. All right? But you already know that because this is just a collection of strings. That's just a collection of ints type of an idea. All right. And they're trying to show you again what it would look like. Yes, sir.
Could you technically put the quotes around the numbers? Like, let's say you want that.
The question was, could you put the quotes around the numbers? Let's just say yes, but unless you have a really good reason for doing so, you wouldn't. How's that? Because if you want to use it numerically, you'd have to go and you'd have to cast it as a number. Right. Now, JavaScript would allow you to do that because JavaScript's real liberal, but no other language would allow you to do that. So here's what we looked at before for an empty array, and I actually did it right, which is something in itself. If we did it the way they show it here, and we say var colors equal bracket bracket, these are not curly braces, they're referred to typically as brackets. All right? It's funny, I'm taking a class with a guy and I online, I believe they said he's from Poland. Man, he's got the weirdest accent I've ever heard in my life. And I don't even know what he'd call brackets, but it's funny listening to him. I'm like, okay, I need some kind of a translation dictionary sometimes because it's just really something else. All right, but notice we're putting in, what I want you to understand about that line right there that's in blue, that's the third array element. Because there's element 0, element 1, and this is element 2. So right now, that automatically is going to create an array with 3 elements in there. And out of those 3 elements, the first 2 are undefined. Remember, that's one of our possible data types, is undefined because we didn't give it a value yet. All right? So they go through here and they say, here is, I like the way the author does this right here on page 151. Because what I showed you so far is we put the same type of variable in, but notice now they're all different types of variables. So the first location has got a string, the second location has got an int, the third has got a floating point, the fourth has got a Boolean. In this language, that's okay. Again, out of all the languages that I know, only PHP and JavaScript allow you to do this. Otherwise, you could have only ints or only strings or only doubles or whatever.
So the undefined is like blank double quotes or something?
No, it literally means you don't know what it is. If you try, the difference is, it's a good question, because if this was double quote, and you tried to print it out, it would just print blanks. If you try to print out something that's undefined, you get an error.
So literally, would it be like, in the array, would it be like just commas in there?
It'd be nothing.
Just nothing?
It's nothing.
Okay.
All right. I think this is the example that you're going to be going through in this chapter. It's some sports team, and you're working with their schedule, I believe. All right. So again, as always, I'm not going to go through those examples that are in here because that's what you're doing for your homework. So turning up all the way to page 155, and Ethan, this probably isn't what you're asking, but if you look on the very bottom of the page, it says in Chapter 2, you use the browser console to check for errors generated by JavaScript. It also includes current variable, blah, 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 blah. And it says, especially when you're entering large arrays, it can be helpful to check the array values using the console. You can do that. All right? Now, some of you have used the console and you've looked at it, but you may or may not know this. You can type stuff into the console. All right? And judging by your head shaking, some of you have done this. So if we had that array that we looked at before, and I wanted to find out who the second person in the apartment was, all right, I could type in apartment bracket 1 bracket and hit enter, and it would show me that that person that was in there was Williams. All right, so you can do that. Just another way that you can use your console as a debugging tool. And they ask you to do some of that in here. There will be times in here where you're asked to do different things, and you're not going to print anything out, but it's just the idea that you get used to using it. All right? All right. On 158, near the bottom of the page, they talk about modifying elements. And I just want to show you this, okay? All right. So we've got all of our apartment people here. I'm going to keep it real simple. And we'll make this person 10. We'll make it correct. Okay? Now, that just means there's some code in there. And Jones managed to move out after a month. They were having wild parties, and they don't want him in there anymore. They just don't. All right? So now, in apartment, and this is actually read, just so you know, this is called apartment sub 10. That's the way you read this. Sub is short for subscript. These are elements, but this would be apartment sub 0 equals Scott, apartment sub 1 equal Williams, etc. That's typically how they're read in most languages. So Jones moved out, and somebody named Green moved in. So all we've done there is we put a different value on the right-hand side of an equal sign. That's how you modify values.
So you wouldn't have to go back to that one that you wrote earlier?
No.
You would just write it?
It'll overwrite what's there. And again, if that confuses you, look at it this way. It's not going to happen, but let's just pretend. I shouldn't say this story because if you haven't heard, another college closed this week. Missouri College closed. I guess the students came in, they were given absolutely no notice. Many of them were 9 weeks away from graduation. They talked to a woman who spent over 40 grand. And as far as she knows, nothing is going to transfer anywhere. She's out 40 grand. All right? But let's suppose that you came in here on Monday. Again, this isn't going to happen, but you come in here on Monday and Rankin's gone.
Give me some more.
Yeah. And the Acme Truck Company is in here. Okay? You come in here and that's what's in this building that we're in right now. Okay? The address is still 755 Part Road, but the inhabitants are different. So that would be like going from Rankin to Acme Truck. That's exactly what you're doing. So when you create an array, those array location, those addresses never change. The inhabitants of those addresses can change at any time because what goes in the inhabitants, those are variables. All right.
So, what if you put green in front of Jones in that list?
What do you mean in front? Oh, if there already was one named Green, there would be.
You were to just put it right next to it, or do you have to?
You couldn't add another value here. That wouldn't make sense. Because
No, I mean, it might
what this is,
above it, like you did apartment 10 again, right above that.
above this, that would create a brand new array
Now within that list, though, that array list, so
right here.
right below Sam Bree,
Okay?
and in between, right. in
So
between-
if we did this
Yeah,
like that,
yeah. Well,
it would create this, but it would immediately take what's in here and replace it with this.
So it just has to do the order then.
Yes.
Like whatever comes later.
It's all
later.
in that case it's order dependent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jones would come before Green, or is it?
No,
before Jones?
green would be gone.
If you, yeah.
You know.
Because he came out of.
Yeah. So imagine they come in and they say they're going to take the apartment.
No, I know, I just meant like if you write it into there, so which one would override which?
Jones would overwrite Green. It's the last one would always override.
It's just because it's reading it that way. It's just
It's because it's all order dependent, and that's the way it is almost all the time.
with arrays.
In
it's
anything
all
you're going to
across
use in
the
here.
board.
I mean, look at it this way.
Right.
You know, you've already seen examples like this where I've done stuff like this for you, where I said var age equal 21. And then now you can say age plus plus plus. That 21's gone, right? It's been replaced with 22. All right? Or if we did var age equal 21 and we found out the person was lying and they're really 18, so they could, of course, get into bars. All right? Now we've overridden it. And that's exactly what we're doing here. All right? Now you can determine how many elements are in an array, by using what's called a property of the array. So in other words, if that confuses you, okay, let's say that all I cared about was how many people were in this apartment. That's all I cared about. So I could say this, var, in fact, I don't even need a var. I can say alert, there, what I want to say is there are 10 families in this apartment. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? That's what I want to say. Okay, but I don't know that. You know, if I'm a computer, I don't know that. So what I can do is I can grab this, and I can say, instead of that, I can say plus the name of the array, which is apartment, dot length plus. So that's going to cut the size of this down just a little. All right. So that they're both of those are going to write exactly there are 10 families in this apartment. Now you might remember, and I go back because he was good enough to find the archive, that I talked about that site that Brady found, that Hunlock site that I sent to you a while back. That's got a big thing in there that's got all 50 or 60 different array functions that are included with arrays. You don't have to, it's not that you have to go back and look at it and memorize it, but you might want to look at it because it's unbelievably powerful. There are so many things, and before you go and do anything with arrays, you always want to go look through the library of functions that you have. You know, it's kind of like this. If I want a book in a library, all right, I should really go to the library first or go online or do whatever. I shouldn't buy the book and give it to the library. You know what I'm saying? It's the same kind of thing. All right. All right, I'll go for about 5 or 10 more minutes, and we'll take another break. All right. Now, why the author mentions this right here on page 160 is way over my pay grade. Because another way that you can create arrays is like this. This is something that we'll get to in Chapter 7. It has to do with objects. So don't worry about it right now. All I do want you to know is if I do this, if I say var array name equal bracket 6 bracket, that this is actually what happens. If you say I don't get it, you don't have to right now. It's okay. All right, you have plenty of time to not be able to understand that stuff when we get to Chapter 7, because that's the hardest chapter that we go over by far. All right. Here's another one of those things. We've learned get element by ID. You can also say get elements. Notice there's an S on there, get elements by tag name. Why would that matter? What if I wanted every H1 tag that was in a document? Okay. Remember, IDs are specific for a page, but classes are not. This allows you to grab a whole class full of stuff. All right. Again, I'm not sure exactly why the author is showing that here, but they are. And this is 161, that caution thing that's in the middle of the page. I'd say it's good reading, but, that's a matter of opinion.
It's in there because we use it in the homework.
Well, it's in there because they're trying to show the tie-in between programming and JavaScript. All right? And that is pretty much the way that you're going to write most code in there. Okay? All right. Here they talk about counting by 0. This is the note that's on page 162. Again, I'm not going to read that to you. All right? But now the author has decided that we're going to jump out of arrays for a second, and we're going to look at loops. All right? So I'm going to quick write 3 loops, and then we're going to start going over them, but we're going to go and take a break. All right. All right. So my goal here is what I want to write out here is x equal 1, x equal 2, x equal 3, x equal 4, x equal 5, x equals 6, x equals 7, x equal 8, x equal 9, and x equal 10. That's what I want to do, is I want to print that on the screen. All right? Now, I could do that as 10 different print statements or as one print statement with plus signs, etc. I could do that. First thing, let me tell you that X in here is what's referred to as an LCV, or a loop control variable. You're going to see this in just a minute. So the reason I'm telling you that is I don't call my things X, Y, and Z, although that's the only time it's considered proper to give names like X, Y, Z, I, J, K, etc. are for counters, for loop variables. Other than that, you really shouldn't use names like that. But I'm going to go, and before your very eyes, I'm going to change all the X equals to LCV equals. Oops. All right, so I've got this. It doesn't make it any better, but it's a loop control variable, and I like to call it what it is. All right, so I want to quickly show you 3 ways that I can print this out on the screen. So this is going to go away, but everybody gets this, right? 1 to 10. Okay, so I'm going to write 3 different ways of doing it. The first is what's going to be called using a while loop. All right, so this isn't code. I'm just showing you I'm doing it using a while loop. So I'm going to say var x equal 1. In fact, I don't even have to do this. I can leave that line out. I'm going to try to make it as simple as I can. While, that's the bad way to code. I want to show you the right way. Var x, we'll use LCV. LCV equal 1. All right. While LCV is less than or equal to 10, LCV, no, that's the next line. Alert, LCV equals plus LCV. LCV plus plus. And what I'm telling you, I'll go right back to it, is this code, these, 6 lines, 7 lines? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it looks like. Those 6 lines will produce this. Does that make sense? Now, since I'm doing it as an alert, it'll give me 10 different alerts. But I could put it into a string or do something else. But I'm just trying to show that to you. That's not what's important. So that's doing it using a while loop. All right? The second way I can do it is what's called using a do-while loop. And it's going to look real similar, but it's not the same thing. So this is a do-while loop. All right? And I put so hopefully you can see how similar they are to one another. All right? Both of these, we're going to come back and talk about them after the break, but both of these things that you see right here, both of them are going to print out this right here. All right? Finally, the third way I can do it, I know that you can't see all of them on the screen at once, sorry about that, but we'll go back and we'll look at all of them together after the break. All right, this is what's called a for loop. All right, and I'll do it like this on purpose. So we'll say here, hopefully you notice when you look at it, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines here with the way I've written it. In fact, I could take this and literally put it in there. Now it's 4 lines as opposed to 6. So we're going to take a break, and after we come back from the break, it's 10:07. Let's come back around 10:17 or so, and we're going to talk about while loops, do while loops, and for loops.